Welcome in to Do All Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thanks for tuning in. Right now, we are talking Week 9 football. Raiders at Jaguars, 1 p.m. in Jacksonville at TIAA Bank Field, which, in case you missed it, is going to have a new name. TIAA has sold their Jacksonville bank, and it's going to have a new name. Not in 2022, but likely for 2023. So hopefully, as long as we can keep calling it the bank, I'll be good to go on that front, but we'll find out more on that later. Let's talk Jaguars Raiders. But first, I'd like to remind you to follow me on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo, Generation Jaguar, at Generation Jag, and please like and subscribe to the YouTube page if you enjoy the content. All right, so as I mentioned, we've got Raiders at Jaguars. The Raiders and Jags both enter the contest with just 2 wins. The Raiders are 2-5. The Jaguars are 2-6. It has not been pretty for these two clubs. The Raiders, according to Vegas, they're 1.5-point road favorites over the Jags, which might be good news for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both of their wins this year have come as underdogs. The over-under in this game is 48. So a decent amount of scoring, not a super high-scoring contest according to Vegas. ESPN Matchup Predictor gives the Jaguars, though, a slight advantage at 51% chance to win. When you look at DVOA, the Jaguars have the advantage over the Raiders. Some of the advanced statistics, it looks like the Jaguars are a better team on paper. They still, despite being 2-6, have a favorable point differential, which is just one of the craziest things you'll ever see with a 2-6 team having a positive point differential on the season. This is the second matchup between Josh McDaniels' Raiders and Doug Peterson's Jaguars. They faced off this year in the first game of the 2022 NFL season, the Hall of Fame game in Ohio. Of course, that one didn't count, and this one certainly does. Both of these teams are trying to get back and figure out a way to scratch and claw and get back into the playoff picture, which both teams are clearly out of right now in the AFC. The Raiders, they've scored at least 29 points in 4 of their 8 contests. They have a dangerous offense, albeit inconsistent when it comes to scoring. I think part of that inconsistency has been Darren Waller kind of struggling to stay healthy with the hamstring injury. He's one of the most effective tight ends in football, and he just hasn't been able to be on the field all that often. Trust me, I know he's been on my fantasy squad. The Raiders still, without Darren Waller, they have a ton of offensive firepower. You talk about Josh Jacobs running all over the yard. You talk about Derek Carr. He's got plenty of talent to move the ball around and find Davante Adams, his best friend, and Mac Hollins has kind of had a breakout. He's been limited in practice this week. We'll see if he plays at wide receiver for the Raiders. But yeah, Davante Adams, Mac Hollins has been playing well. You have Hunter Renfrow, who has had a down year so far. You have Josh Jacobs, as I mentioned. Keelan Cole returns to Duval for the Raiders. When I look at this Raiders offense, they have a ton of offensive firepower, like I said. Plenty of talent. But I think the disconnect has had some to do with Josh McDaniels' offense. And Josh McDaniels is a fantastic offensive coordinator and play caller and designer. But his offense is pretty darn rigid and by the book, and that can be a good thing if you have the personnel that is willing and able to execute that. But right now, it's just still a work in progress for the Raiders on the offensive side of the ball. Again, they've had some really big games. They've had some not-so-great contests as well. Davante can still kill you, no doubt about it. He's still one of the top 2-3 receivers in football, and while it hasn't gone according to plan for the Raiders this year, that's a guy that can still get out on the field and absolutely shred you, and the Jaguars have struggled against good receivers this year. And getting back to Josh Jacobs, the running game for the Raiders, he's been playing his best football this year. He's averaging over 5.5 yards a carry. He is in a contract year, so that can obviously serve as added motivation for players when they're trying to get paid here. But Jacobs has been fantastic, and he's not really a burner. He's not a guy that you're worried about taking it 80 yards to the house, but he is going to consistently run through arm tackles. He's going to consistently make people miss in the open field and just be a real pain in the ass for opposing defensive coordinators. And the Jaguars have struggled tackling runners. They're last in the league. when it comes to tackling efficiency, or you could say first when it comes to missed tackles in football this year, which is obviously not a stat you want to be first in. So the Jaguars will need to figure out how to wrap up and contain and swarm to the football and stop missing so many tackles. Both of the offensive lines in this one are allowing their runners to be efficient, and I think that's helped Josh Jacobs out as well. But I mainly put Josh Jacobs just balling out. Like, that's why that contract year, the doubt, all that stuff, I think has motivated Josh Jacobs to have his best year as a pro so far. Looking at the Raiders on the defensive side of the ball, they're struggling to get after the passer outside of Max Crosby, who's one of the most talented young pass rushers in football. We all know that. They're last in the league in sacks, and they brought in Chandler Jones this year, who's obviously up there in age, was one of the big free agent signings of the offseason, not just in Las Vegas, but around the entire league. So when you look at Chandler Jones not producing at a high level at all, that's been a major disappointment for the Raiders. They're allowing 25 points a contest, 258 yards per game through the air. Their run defense has been fairly stout until last week against the Saints. Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill ran all over the Raiders last week. It was not pretty in a 24-0 rout of the Raiders in New Orleans. So can the Jaguars take advantage with Travis Etienne, who's averaging over 6 yards a carry, might be the most explosive back in football? We're going to find out. Like I said, Max Crosby, he's been getting it done as a pass rusher. He is still, I shouldn't say still, he's a young player, but he is among the very best in football. And while Chandler Jones is struggling, Max Crosby is not. He is getting the job done in a major way. One of my favorite young players in the NFL, Trayvon Merrick, a 2021 first-round pick or second-round pick by the Raiders. He has had some struggles this year at safety after a really impressive rookie campaign. He's been giving up a fair amount of yardage over the middle, and so that could be a player. I know he's talented, but he's struggling to find his way in this new defense a little bit. Maybe the Jaguars look to attack there. The Raiders defensively, they have shown the ability and the willingness to switch up their coverages based on their opponent, based on their opponent's strengths and weaknesses. We all know Trevor Lawrence's weakness right now, or we should know. He has not done well against cover 2 looks. He hasn't done well against condensed zones, and that's probably what you're going to see some of here from the Raiders defense. They've gone to cover 2 in a couple games this season, and it's worked for them a little bit. We'll see how it works for them against the Jaguars if they do decide to employ that cover 2 that Trevor has struggled to read a bit to this point in his career. When I look at this game outside of the cover 2 potential for the Raiders defense that could cause Trevor Lawrence some issues, can the Jaguars avoid giving up the big play on the left side of the defense, specifically in coverage? Whether it has been Shaquille Griffin, Trey Herndon, the Jaguars have been giving up big plays on that side of the field week in and week out. For the most part, you have Tyson Campbell shutting it down on the defensive right side, which has been really great to see in his second year. He's ascended to certainly playing at a top 10 level at the cornerback position, probably even higher than that. But he's playing really good football, shutting it down over there. Will the Jaguars have him follow Davante Adams at all? I think they should. I think if you get Davante Adams on Trey Herndon, if I'm Derek Carr, I'm throwing him the ball every single time. And it looks like, according to Mike Caldwell, Trey Herndon will continue to start outside with Darius Williams manning the slot and Tyson Campbell taking the other side. They wouldn't comment on whether Tyson would move around a little bit more, follow a little bit more. He did do that some against Cortland Sutton and the Broncos last week. I would encourage the Jaguars to continue that trend and make sure to not get Davante Adams lined up against Trey Herndon too often, because that could end in disaster. And then can Josh Allen, again defensively, Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, can they get after Derek Carr? And it's not just Josh and Trayvon. You've got Arden Key. You've got DeJuan Smoot. You've got these guys. Can they get after Derek Carr, get him off his mark, hit him? He really struggles when he gets hit. Joey Bosa's talked about it. We've all seen it. If you can get Derek Carr uncomfortable, it can really lead to positive results for your defense. Can Trevor, on the offensive side of the ball, can Trevor just not turn the ball over in the red zone? That would be a massive step for this team. Can you avoid the boneheaded penalties that have cost you on both sides of the ball throughout the season? Can you get Jamal Agnew back? Looks like he might be back for the Jaguars this week. He's missed a couple weeks with a knee injury. This is a player that helps the team tremendously on special teams as a returner, but also helps the offense in a major way. Even when he's not getting the football, he has the ability to take the top off the defense. He has the ability to spread the field and create space for others. So getting him back would be potentially huge for this Jaguars offense. And if Trevor can just avoid the red zone turnover, if this defense and offense can both kind of limit the boneheaded penalties late in the game, and I think if you can get Derek Carr off his mark, rattle him a little bit, you've got a great chance of winning this one. Again, the Jaguars are 1.5 point home underdogs against the Raiders, while ESPN Matchup Predictor gives the Jaguars a 51% chance to win. DVOA and EPA and all that fun stuff suggests the Jaguars are probably the better team, but the Raiders are a more veteran team than the Jaguars. Of course, they are traveling to the East Coast to take on the Jags in this one, which is certainly a little bit of a disadvantage for a West Coast team, but it's going to be a close one, I think. When you talk about it again, both of these teams are winless in one-score games. Both of them. The Jaguars are 0-6. The Raiders are 0-4. So even though the Raiders are the veteran team, even though both of these teams have coaches that are brilliant offensive minds and a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, they just can't win close games. Who is going to win their first close game? Maybe neither team. Maybe it'll be a blowout. If it is a blowout, I don't think it's going to be the Raiders blowing the Jaguars out. The Jaguars have just been too tough this year. But I don't see the Jaguars blowing the Raiders out either. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your you-know-what here. I think it's going to be a close game. I think one of these teams probably is going to get their first one-score victory of the year. And I really am not sure which one it's going to be. We are going to do bold predictions and keys to victory on Saturday, so make sure to be tuned in for that, where I will give my final score prediction. But for now, I'll just leave it at this should be a very hotly contested game. Two teams that are desperate to get back in the winning column, desperate to get back into the playoff picture, which looks really bleak for both squads right now. The Raiders at 2-5, the Jaguars even worse at 2-6. Not looking good for this season, but can you build some momentum with this young team if you're Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars? That is the hope this week. That's going to do it for me here. Like to remind you to follow me on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo, Generation Jaguar at Generation Jag. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell on YouTube so you don't miss a show on here. If you want to support the channel further, you can become a channel member. You can also go check out genjag.com, get some new Duval gear. We've got a pre-order for our Duval throwback sweatshirt up right now. You can go check it out. Should be up there through next Tuesday. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, Duval. Hope you have a great weekend.